Welcome to the Magus Aeon podcast, where the light of Gnosis destroys all ignorance, and what you thought you knew, you didn't.
Let the brother receive the light.
Hey folks, it's Alex here at the Magus Aeon podcast. With me is another special guest. His name is Robert Sullivan IV, and he is the author of various books such as The Royal Arch of Enoch, as well as Secret Symbolism or Cinema Symbolism. How are you doing today, Robert?
Hey, Alex. Thank you for having me on Magus Eon, your podcast. It's great to be here with you, and it's much appreciated. I look forward to the interview. Thank you again for having me on. I look forward to it.
Absolutely. And you know, I found you through Miguel Connor's website or his podcast. So this is like a few years ago. And then when I actually listened to you, I was really intrigued at what you were talking about in that podcast with Miguel. We actually did an interview before. I think this was like back in 2013, I believe. And then I asked you to do an interview, and then you agreed, which I was blown away that you agreed to, and so I thank you for that for sure. So I have a number of questions actually. Can you, for the first question is, introduce yourself and basically what you're about, in case they're not familiar with you.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's correct, Alex. I think it was 13. I've been on with Miguel a couple times on Aeon Pike there, Gnostic Radio, and yeah, you sent me some questions. I was happy to answer them. My name is Robert Sullivan. Just for the audience. I'm the author of 3 books. The first book is titled The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism. The thesis of this book was to document a previously undiscovered historical anomaly, which was how a high-degree ceremonial in Masonry was incorporating elements of the Book of Enoch or 1 Enoch. And when this ritual was being developed, the Book of Enoch was lost to history, was lost to the West. Yet this book was being relied upon, at least component elements of it were, to craft this high degree ceremonial. And this is vitally important within Freemasonry, but in a historical context, because it is really this ritual that a lot of the founders and the philosophies and the symbolisms of the creation of the United States is coming out of. So that was my first book, titled The Royal Arch of Enoch. Then that originally came out in August of 2012. I released my second book, titled Cinema Symbolism. This came out in the summer, July, of 2014. And this book was really the first of its kind, where I really broke down a lot of movies, that were incorporating a lot of, hidden symbolism, arcane meanings, ancient religions, numerology, archetypes, veiled imagery. And this book was really a continuation of the final chapter of the Royal Arch of Enoch, which also dealt with similar themes. I just recently released my third book. The print edition came out 2 months ago, and the ebook actually just came out last week. In fact, as we're doing this interview in early June of 2017, some places the ebook aren't even out yet. I mean, I know it's up on Amazon, but I know it's not on Barnes and Noble yet. And this is titled Cinema Symbolism 2, which is really sort of the sequel of Cinema Symbolism, where I'm just same premise, where I'm breaking down more movies on an esoteric level, hidden symbolisms, occult themes, mysticism in film. And like I said, I'm the author of 3 books. I'm currently writing a couple others. I'm working on my first work of fiction that's being written as we speak. I've started outlining Cinema Symbolism 3. I've also started working on another book on Freemasonry. I'll just wrap up your question by just with this last point. Is the books were Royal Arch of Enoch and Cinema Symbolism have been recently republished by me. Royal Arch of Enoch was republished back in December, January, and Cinema Symbolism was republished by me in January, February. And I created my own publishing company, my own publishing impression titled Deadwood Publishing. So that is the new company that is putting out the books. So anytime you're looking for me or looking for the books, it's Deadwood Publishing is the new revised editions, and of course Cinema Symbolism too. So those books are all available right now. And like I said, I look forward to being on the show. Any questions you got, throw them at me.
Sweet deal, man. And you're also an attorney, right? Or are you currently practicing?
Yeah, I do a little bit of law on the side. I'm really concentrating on writing right now, but I am admitted to the Maryland bar in D.C. and federal court. So
okay, awesome. And and also a question for you, as far as like degree, like which degree are you in, or can you even tell me?
Oh no, of course. I am a Blue Lodge Mason. I have been in the Blue Lodge. That is if the listeners are not aware, that is degrees 1, 2, and 3. Of entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. You cannot hold yourself out as a Freemason until you are raised, until you are received the 3rd degree. And usually a lot of lodges require you, the lodge I'm in requires you to pass a catechism on it as well. So, I've been in the Blue Lodge since 1997. That's 20 years. And, I joined the Scottish Rite in 1999, of which I'm the 32nd degree. So you can't join the Scottish Rite or the York Rite. They're the two high degree bodies. They're the two primary ones. You can't join them until you are a Blue Lodge Master Mason. So I'm in the Blue Lodge, and I'm also a 32nd degree Scottish Rite.
Okay, awesome. Hey, the roots of Freemasonry are very much clouded in mystery, and I've seen a lot of different theories of where it comes from. A lot of people say that it comes from Hiram Biff, or King Solomon himself, or the Templars. I mean, of course, they're all involved in the the Freemasonic legends, of course. But
sure.
But is there like a specific point in history where actually the Freemasonic tradition comes from? Do you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is where you kind of are who you want to listen to. Where it actually comes from, I mean, is open to speculation. It comes into history officially, on June 24th, 1717. We are approaching the tricentenary of Freemasonry. It's about to turn 300 in a couple weeks. And it is officially on the map on, June 24th, 1717. Now, naturally, there were Masonic lodges operating in places like Scotland, in England, on the continent of Europe prior to this. I mean, this is irrefutable, but it is officially comes onto the scene, in June of 1717. I mean, where it actually, Freemasonry, you got Anderson's Constitutions, which come out in 1721, which traces Masonry's origins back to the biblical stoneworkers, people building things like Solomon's Temple, Tower of Babel. In the rituals, you've got, the construction of Solomon's Temple. Then in 1737, you have another guy coming along named Chevalier Ramsay, who says, no, this is all incorrect. Freemasonry comes from the ancient mystery schools, and they were brought, the mystery schools were transported into Europe by the Knights Templar. You clearly have elements of things, ancient religions like Gnosticism in this. You have Rosicrucianism in this. So it's a mixed bag. It really officially comes on the scene in 1717. Sort of the theory is, I'll just wrap up on this.
Sure.
Is you had a guy in England who was involved with Masonry and Rosicrucianism named Elias Ashmole. He's at Oxford University. He's a supporter of King Charles. During the Civil War, of course, the Puritans wind up winning. He, at Oxford University, not only does he wind up founding a museum there, but he found something called the Invisible College. It's out of this that the Royal Society comes. It's out of the Royal Society that sort of the founders of Freemasonry come in 1717. And then 20 years later, you have the Ramsay oration where he diverges with this, and gives this oration where he says that Masonry is coming from the Templars, and it's Ramsay's oration really that births the high degrees of Freemasonry, such as the Scottish Rite, and certainly serves as a major influence on the York Rite of Freemasonry. That's really the other premier high degree body. So it officially comes on the scene in 1717, but naturally there were elements and components of Masonry existing prior to that.
Okay. So I actually found this out when we actually look in the Book of Genesis, and you look at the legends of Cain and Tubal Cain.
Right.
It's very much well, according to one video I was watching, they were explaining that the Freemasonic, at least the spiritual origins of Freemasonry actually comes from this bloodline of Cain. And now, of course, people aren't familiar with that story. Just you have to look in Genesis where it says even Eve tells Adam that the Lord helped her beget Cain, or an angel helped her with that, or the angel of the Lord. But when you look at Kabbalistic legends, it actually says that it was Samael that actually he interbred, or he copulated with Eve, and then he gave birth to Cain. And then you look at different specific Gnostic texts, it actually says the same thing, only in that Yahweh is actually inverted into kind of a demon, basically, some kind of demon god called Yaldabaoth, and then he inseminates Eve, and then he gives birth to Cain and Abel, these twins. So according to this one video I was watching, it was I just forget the name of it, but they were explaining to us that the whole Freemasonry comes from this bloodline of Cain. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be really skeptical of that. That is something that I would be highly skeptical of. I've been involved with it for 20 years, and it incorporates a lot of elements, mystery school elements and biblical lore and things like that. But I mean, the modern day organization is 1717.
Right.
There's really nothing, there are people involved with it, but there's really no bloodline or anything like that.
Okay.
I mean, that's something I would be kind of, skeptical on. It's one of those things. It's like, you're left to speculate. I mean, you have, Anderson saying it comes from these biblical stoneworkers, and you have Ramsay with the mystery schools.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure it's probably a little bit of both, but, I would be very highly skeptical when I hear bloodlines in Freemasonry.
Right.
That's something I would kind of, shy away from.
And it's kind of interesting with the whole blue degree concept. Albert Pike talks about how the blue degrees are basically there, he's there to there's specific symbols to actually dissuade you from actually coming to the mysteries or actually understanding Freemasonry or something like that. I wasn't
right. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right. But it's kind of interesting though. I want to make a connection to a movie which you obviously know. It's The Matrix.
Oh, sure.
So if you remember in that scene with Neo and Morpheus, Morpheus offers a red pill or blue pill, and that blue pill, that it ejects him back into materiality, of delusional false reality he's been living his whole life, and then the red pill, that really means the red is a color of initiation, right? So you're supposed to be initiated to a higher degree. So I don't know. I just thought there was some interesting correlations to that. So I don't know what you think about that.
No, I agree. I talk about this in Cinema Symbolism. I'll just backpedal a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, what Pike talks about is, and I don't really disagree with him, is he says, you go through the blue degrees, and this is degrees 1, 2, and 3, and I mean he gets into this thing that the symbols that are placed there are designed to mislead you and things like that. And what he's really trying to say is this stuff has deeper meaning than what's explained to you. And there's different levels of this. And he's right. I mean, this stuff, the way it's presented to you is, it's just this allegorical story of Solomon's temple, but on a deeper level, where, it's Hiram Abiff, he's killed, he's resurrected. This obviously goes into much deeper symbolism with things, with the Christ story, death and resurrection. And of course, this is the Osirian, mystery from Egypt, the death of Osiris, the resurrection, the Isis symbolism. And it's a deeper meaning is what Pike's saying. And then he says you get to the high degrees, there's a lot more secrets there. I mean, I don't disagree with that either. But what is key in this is you can't get to the high degrees until you go through the Blue Lodge. But I mean, the high degrees really do get into a lot, more of mystery school and, history teaching. And this is really true with the Royal Arch ceremonial, which is part of the high degree system. But what you're talking about with the Matrix Nexus, this is something I actually talk about in the first movie book, where you're absolutely right, where you have Neo being, and I'll just get into this a little bit. This is a great talking point. I mean, this is something I really, really like talking about. I mean, is you have that whole scene in the first Matrix movie, I don't dispute what you're saying at all, where you have him being brought in by Trinity. He goes into the temple, which is the hotel. I mean, you have the black and white checker floor. This is obviously some sort of quasi-Masonic temple of initiation. He goes up the staircase, symbolizing ascension. And then he meets Morpheus. And then he's offered the red and the blue, the red pill and the blue pill. And you're absolutely right. The blue pill just returns you to your banal, materialism. The red pill is, sort of the real truths. I mean, this gets into the whole thing with Masonry. The blue pill is the Blue Lodge. Right. You can stay where you're at. The high degrees are actually called the red degrees of all things. I mean, that's the higher secrets. So it's the blue versus the red. And of course he takes the red. There's a nexus with the blue. I mean, it definitely has a Masonic connection to it, where it's like stay in the Blue Lodge and stay where you are, or welcome to the higher degrees, learn the Kabbalistic secrets. So I like that dichotomy. I'll just wrap up on this also saying that that whole thing with the blue pill, that ties into some other movies as well that predate the Matrix. Number one is a movie that came out in the early 1980s called Saturn III. And that was a movie where they had a pill called a Blue Dreamer, which if you took it, it put you back to sleep. It put you basically in a state of stasis. And then, of course, you have a movie that came out a few years earlier in I think it was 97, called The Fifth Element, where Bruce Willis and the people they're traveling on the ship to Fhloston Paradise. Yeah. And they got to go to sleep. They're rendered unconscious. And then the stewardesses are wearing the blue costumes. Sleep. Yeah. So you have that whole dichotomy of blue putting you back to sleep. And again, I don't disagree with you in any way, shape, or form, Alex. And it's something I definitely get into in cinema symbolism.
Wow. So I'm not the only one who noticed that. Yeah, I was actually doing a lot of research into Freemasonry a few months ago, and then I stopped because I was just busy at the time doing other things. But it's interesting that you brought up the whole idea about how in the blue degrees you're being sort of misled in a way, but yeah, you're trying to find the deeper meanings to all these symbols. Now, even the Bible actually alludes to this idea. And I know a lot of people might say, like, what? You're supposed to read it literally, or,
Oh, of course. I mean, my goodness gracious. I mean, I have a whole chapters upon chapters on this in Royal Arch and in the new book I wrote, Cinema Symbolism 2. Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, you can look at this stuff literally with the Blue Lodge, for example. I mean, this is what Pike is talking about. It's that he uses the word misled, and it's probably too strong a word, but what he's really saying is there's deeper meanings to this. I mean, so you're absolutely right. I mean, you have in the third degree where the candidate is playing Hiram Abiff. He's killed. He's resurrected. You have the dispatching of the 12 fellowcraft to come look for him. He's killed and resurrected. I mean, you could just say on a perfunctory level, that's it. That's the ritual period. It's based on the story in the Bible. With Solomon, it comes out of the Book of Kings, period. Nothing more to it. I mean, and of course you could see the Christ allegory with it. The death and resurrection, the 12 fellowcraft, the 12 apostles. I mean, then you can go deeper with it and say, okay, it's the Osirian cycle, the death and resurrection of the sun. There's references to Egypt with the 5 points of fellowship of resurrection, and the 5 points of the blazing star. You read Albert Pike, he'll tell you this symbolizes Sirius. Sirius is the Virgin Mother, the star of Isis. So you have, who's widowed when Osiris dies. You may have heard Freemasons called widows' sons. this is where this comes from. So there's a lot of, deeper meaning to this. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
the same thing you're saying with the Bible. I mean, you get into the whole idea, okay, is it literal history or is it, allegory, where you clearly have in like the New Testament
Mm-hmm.
where, Christ is, the Son figure, the 12 apostles are the, administrators or the helpers of the Son.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're the 12 houses of the zodiac. You have the whole idea of the death and resurrection. I mean, my goodness gracious. I mean, Jesus being a sun god. I mean, he's born at the winter solstice and resurrected at the vernal equinox.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that's not a sun god, I don't know what is. So yeah, I mean, with the Bible, you definitely have the whole idea of, is it, it's allegorical. I mean, there's a completely legitimate allegorical interpretation of it that it's representing of, these astrological Neoplatonic themes. And I write about this all over the place. I mean, I write about this in Royal Arch. I write about this in Cinema Symbolism. I write about it in Cinema Symbolism too, because it ties into the whole idea of, what I call in those books, the sort of like the Christ figure, the solar hero, the savior archetype.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that character turns up in film all the time. I mean, it's Neo, for God's sakes, in
Yeah.
the Matrix. So, I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. And I think, certainly when it comes to the Bible, both the old and the new, you definitely can look at that thing allegorically, not literally. And I think that is a proper interpretation of it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like when you read the Bible, I mean, I think there are multiple layers of meaning to it. I don't think there's just one layer of meaning necessarily. I mean, I mean, just look at the Apostle Paul. He's talking about the mysteries of God, or he says like his church is like are the stewards of the mysteries of God, right? Then we look at other texts like in Hebrews where it talks about we should like move beyond the elementary teachings of Christ and move on to maturity and move away from not just being in the foundation of repentance or the acts. I mean, it's all necessary to become a Christian, but you're supposed to move on from those elementary teachings, like to be a babe in Christ, and from drinking milk, but to eating the meat. Necessarily, right? They mean eating Christ. So then, that's what the author of Hebrews is talking about. And you look at the Zohar. It even says that the narratives of the doctrine are a cloak, and that if you like the simple look of if you look at the garment without actually looking, like, taking out the cloak and actually seeing what's inside, you don't really know what it's saying. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you had I mean, I don't disagree with you at all. You have the church father Origen who said, within Christianity there are two doctrines, one secret and one profane.
Right.
I mean, what is he talking about? I mean, it's the the profane is that this is literal history. The secret doctrine, which he says is not written down, it's passed down orally, is this that it's allegorical and that it's like a mystery school teaching almost. And then you even have I don't want to quote him verbatim, but you had one of the early popes, I believe it was Pope Leo the Great, who essentially said something straight out to the effect of you should not take these stories literally.
Mm-hmm.
You should not take all of this as literal history. This is somewhat allegorical. I mean, even Christ said it himself. He said, or one of the apostles said it. It might be in the book, in Acts or one of those. If Christ wasn't speaking in riddles, he wasn't speaking.
Right.
So, right. I mean, that even tells you right there, he's speaking allegorically.
Right.
He's speaking literally. So yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you in any way that there are multiple levels of interpretation with this. And I definitely think it's, a symbolic interpretation is a legitimate one. And I don't disagree either with when it comes to, Masonic rituals, that these things have these deeper allegorical meanings. I think that's really what Albert Pike is trying to talk about. I mean, you'll find this all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I talk about it in the Royal Arch of Enoch. You'll find it in the works of people like Manly P. Hall, and even Albert Mackey, where, he's another Masonic writer, that there are these deeper meanings to all this. And, you should look beyond just what's going on around you in the Blue Lodge. Take the time and learn the symbolism because, it's like, you'll find this new world open up to you.
Now, speaking of Royal Arch, that's another question of mine. Now,
Sure.
There's another Masonic author out there. His name is Tim Hogan, and he claims that he's of Templar descent. But he talks about how the eagle on the Great Seal, that there's on its left wing actually has like 33 feathers now, which he claims symbolizes the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and how it's basically like an entrance to the left-hand path. So I don't know if you have anything to say about that, and also another question would be like, what is a Royal Arch exactly? Like, I always get confused on that.
Sure.
And so
I can answer all that.
Mm-hmm.
The Great Seal, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that both the obverse and the reverse, I mean, just are Masonic symbolism all over the place. I mean, you have the one feather is 33 feathers, the other is 32. So you have the 32nd degree and the 33rd degree. But if you pay attention, really, the number 13 is omnipresent all over the Great Seal. And this is, exoterically, they'll tell you this has something to do with the 13 colonies. I don't disagree with that, but on a deeper level, it's the 13th degree of the Scottish Rite, which is the original 13th degree of the Rite of Perfection, which is where the Scottish Rite came, which is where the Scottish Rite was basically born out of, which is the Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial. It's the recovery of the name of God. So it's investing the seal with numinosity,
Mm-hmm.
with divine presence. It's not evil. It's not anything. I mean, the Scottish Rite Temple sits 13 blocks from the White House. So anytime you see that number 13 popping up, it has to do with this 13th degree of the Scottish Rite called the Royal Arch of Enoch.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it a Royal Arch? It has to do with the ritual ceremonial that you have to understand Masonic ritual with all this, and why this degree is so important is the guy in the third degree, the candidate is portraying Hermes Biff, and Hermes Biff has this secret word, and the word that Hermes Biff possesses is the name of God, which is more commonly known as the Tetragrammaton.
Mm-hmm.
And he has it, and these three fellowcrafts want to extract it from it. And it's from this word that all wisdom derives from. It's an emanation of Hebrew Kabbalah, to boil it down.
Okay.
And of course, Renaissance Christian Kabbalah, same thing. But at any rate, these three fellowcrafts threaten to kill him. And he says, no, he says, I'll give you the name. I'll give you the word once the Temple of Solomon is complete. Well, it's not good enough for these guys, and they kill him. And the word is lost. And you will constantly hear this in the Blue Lodge. I mean, this is what the Blue Lodge guys, are running around looking for. It's it's the Grail quest. It's, looking for this lost word of the Master Mason, this lost word of Hermes Biff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you fast forward to the 13th degree in the Scottish Rite, this is the 7th degree in the York Rite. What you have in this ritual is the Jewish people are in exile in Babylon, and a Babylonian king named Cyrus the Great dispatches this Jewish governor named Zorobabel
Mm-hmm.
back to the Holy Land to rebuild the Second Temple, to rebuild the Temple of Solomon. Remember, the temple's been destroyed once the Babylonians come in.
Mm-hmm.
So he sends this guy back to rebuild the Second Temple, and they're there and they're clearing the rubble away, and all of a sudden they discover this trap door. This trap door springs open, which is actually a keystone. And the sunlight comes in, and underneath 9 arches, underneath 9 royal arches, is the name of God. It's the lost word of Hermes Biff. They find it. And what is lost is now recovered.
Mm-hmm.
And they find the Tetragrammaton in this Royal Arch ceremonial. That's why it's so critical. That's why it's probably one of the most important, if not the most important degrees of Freemasonry. It's the restoration of the name of God. Why is it called the Royal Arch? It has to do with these 9 arches that this name is concealed under. So there you have it. That's why it is called the Royal Arch of Enoch. And this ritual is tying in these elements of the Book of Enoch,
Mm-hmm.
this restoration of this lost wisdom that Enoch gleaned, in his travels in the heavens, that is talked about in the Book of Enoch. But when this ritual was being put together, this was off the history pages. So it's a very fascinating conundrum and anomaly that's going on.
Wow. And what's interesting about the Royal Arch, and I kind of theorized this on my website. So the Royal Arch, in my opinion, sort of symbolizes what is in the Bible calls a firmament in a way. Because I mean, even look at in the there's all these different monuments that all these people are actually building, they're restoring like these arches. Like, I don't know if you remember seeing this, but in the news, but you know how the ISIL people or the Daesh terrorists, they blew up these, arches, right, in Assyria, but now they're rebuilding them back, like in places like New York City or France, and somehow that's like supposedly like a gateway to like another dimension or something, and that supposedly symbolizes like Baal worship, and how, oh, that's like, that's an affront to Yahweh or God or something, but anyway, where I'm going with this is that when you actually look into like different ideas like Freemasonry, and you look at like of those, that Royal Arch, and then you look at, compare it to like I don't know if you remember in Star Trek in Next Generation where it had this holodeck, and that arch actually was the place where it actually manifested their holographic reality of whatever kind of fantasy they decided to create. So I was just, in my mind, I thought maybe that was somehow connected with that Royal Arch to somehow actually influencing reality in a way. Like, so I feel like maybe it's like there's specific Freemasonic rituals that actually goes towards influencing reality in some way. I mean, I don't know if I'm off the mark totally with that, or I don't know.
That sounds a little that just sounds a little maybe too far, I think.
Okay.
But what I would say to you though is, if you once you get the eye for this, you will spot this stuff everywhere because, like for example, you have like the Royal Arch is, you got to know the backstory behind this because, once you get this, then some of the stuff will start, lining up. I mean, when you have the Royal Arch, you have another Royal Arch that's symbolic. You have the sun moving on this Royal Arch, this archway from starting at the vernal equinox, moving to the autumn equinox with this great northern arch, where the keystone is in the sign of Cancer, which is the summer solstice. I mean, this is why Freemasonry is founded on June 24th. I mean, it's the sun at the strongest power, at the height of its strength in the northern hemisphere. So you have the sun moving on this great northern archway from the vernal equinox to the autumn equinox. And if you know Freemasonry, the most important symbol within Masonry is the sun. I mean, everything in Masonry revolves around the sun. It's a solar brotherhood. I mean, just from start to finish. I mean, and then you get into, some of the symbolism where in the Royal Arch ceremonial, what happens is, and I'm just going to backpedal a little bit.
Sure.
You have Enoch going up, learning this divine wisdom, and he comes back down to earth. And this is where this gets controversial is Enoch catches wind that the flood of Noah is coming and that God or the Demiurge is going to try to eradicate this wisdom that Enoch gleans. So he builds this subterranean vault. This is what is eventually discovered. And in it, he puts the name of God, and on two pillars, he puts all this wisdom that he's learned. On one pillar, he puts mathematics, and on the other pillar, he puts the 7 liberal arts and sciences. And it's through the correct pronunciation of this word that these pillars are eventually restored to mankind. When you get to the Masonic ceremonial, this is what's found. But in the underlying philosophy, this treasure vault has already been breached by two characters. One is Pythagoras, who goes down there and has his eureka moment, right? Eureka, I have found it, pronounces the name of God and restores mathematics to mankind. The other character is a guy named Hermes Trismegistus, who goes down, pronounces the word, and restores the 7 liberal arts and sciences. So, I mean, if you got the eye for this, I mean, you're going to, so for example, you're talking about the restoration of wisdom, the restoration of knowledge. You look no further in New York City, you have the library there of NYU, in Washington Square, named after George Washington. I mean, what's there? It's the archway. You have in Paris, France, the arch, the grand arch in the circle with the roads radiating out of it, the solar reference. Look no further than St. Louis, the great archway to the west. That has Royal Arch symbolism in it all over the place. The keystone was dropped on the date of when the Statue of Liberty was consecrated. So it ties in this whole thing with the Royal Arch, New York, the York Rite, and it's just when you begin to break it down and you understand this underlying symbolism, believe me, you'll see this stuff all over the place. I mean, another example of this of Hermes or Hermes Trismegistus being this emblem of high wisdom and high degree knowledge is, you go to Christ Church and Oxford University. Well, when you walk into the quad, you won't find any Christian symbolism. You'll find the fountain with Hermes on it, and it's symbolizing high wisdom. So, you get into that, and, once you understand the symbolism, what the book really does is, and this is Royal Arch I'm talking about, but my other books also kind of revolve around this, is finding the correct context. Because once that context is discovered, then the symbolism becomes open, and, then you'll understand why the United States Capitol building has a dome on it, and why the Bodleian Library at Oxford University has a dome on it, and why this archway sits here, and why Hermes or Mercury is there. And it's a fascinating study, but it really is all coming out of this Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial.
I see. Wow, that's fascinating, and it's interesting that you mentioned Hermes Trismegistus and the Pillars of Enoch, because when you look at Plato, he actually talks about how he was inspired by the Pillars of Hermes, actually, to gain his Platonic wisdom. So really, all this Greek philosophy really goes back to Hermes, if you think about it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, then you got comparatively, it's Thoth in Egypt, and then there are even ties with him to Enoch. So absolutely, yeah. I mean, Hermes Trismegistus is really sort of the godfather. I mean, he's really the godfather of Freemasonry. A lot of Masonic writers don't like to hear that, but if you read Masonic literature, I mean, the ones written by Freemasons, they'll tell you, okay, well, where did Freemasonry ultimately derive from? And they'll say, the answer is, the 7 liberal arts and sciences. If you're a Freemason and you're listening to this podcast, you're going to know exactly what the hell I'm talking about. And of course, but then and who's the restorer of the 7 liberal arts of sciences? I mean, it's Hermes Trismegistus. It's through the correct pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton in the Vault of Enoch that the 7 liberal arts and sciences are restored to mankind. So, Hermes Trismegistus is really sort of this godfather figure within Freemasonry. That's a little controversial, but I have no problem saying it.
Wow. And if you look at different texts like the Hermetica, for example, like the Corpus Hermeticum, which I'm pretty sure you're familiar with, a lot of this, what Hermes is saying to Tot really ties in with even Christianity and Gnosticism.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I get into that, the divine Pymander and Asclepius, and you will find some you get into this I talk about this in the Royal Arch. You're really bringing it back to me. I haven't talked about this in a while, but you get into these what's the word I'm looking for? You get into the District of Columbia, the template. You get into these utopian novellas. I mean, I get into the one by the Dominican friar Tommaso Campanello, who wrote The City of the Sun. That's really a very utopic reference to for the template of Washington. And you get where was he inspired from? You get into the divine Pymander, the Corpus Hermeticum with cities like Andoceton, which was allegedly built by Hermes Trismegistus, you get into some medieval grimoires, even with that. So yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating study, no question about it. I mean, it really is a river that runs deep, with Hermes Trismegistus and the sacred wisdom and who it's influencing, and the Masons use it. I mean, I don't dispute that in any way, shape, or form.
And if you think about it, even the Hermetic tradition really gave birth to the Renaissance, because it was only afterwards where actually all of those sciences were rediscovered.
Absolutely. Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. You've got the whole invention of Christian Kabbalah, which is Hebrew Kabbalah Christianized. You've got people like Raymond Lully. I guess I'm trying to think of some of the forerunners to the Renaissance, like Giovanni Pico della Mandarola, Masillo Ficino. I mean, he's sort of the translator of the Corpus Hermeticum. I mean, then of course you get into the two big names in the Renaissance, Giordano Bruno, John Dee. I mean, then you get into who they're influencing, people like Robert Flood. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't, I mean, again, this is all, coming from the Hermetic tradition, Hermes Trismegistus, Corpus Hermeticum, the Medici family. Sure, I don't dispute any of it, and
Yeah.
fascinating. It's great stuff. I write about. I mean, if you like what I'm talking about, by all means, check out the Royal Arch of Enoch. I get into it much more in that book.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Hermes, he's like basically the prime angel in a way. He's like the bestower of the seal, the prophecy. And then you think about, he also connects to John the Baptist in a lot of ways too, and even Jesus.
Oh, sure.
So he's always saying, you're supposed to, Hermes tells Tot to be, to submerge himself or immerse himself into, this bowl of wisdom, or crater of wisdom that, God bestows upon, the initiated, right? And,
Well, right. Well, then you have also with a lot of the church fathers, the early church fathers, they all left Hermes Trismegistus alone. They didn't, he's a pagan god, but they didn't beat up on him because he was always one of the ones who they saw as prophesizing Christ.
right.
So, the church fathers left him alone. So, he's one of the pagan gods that the Christian church fathers had no problem with.
Yeah, I find that really fascinating. And if you look at like Clement of Alexandria, he describes Christ in terms of being like a hierophant, or like a torchbearer, and he's like, which of course these are all terms that come from the pagan mysteries, obviously.
Oh, sure.
So,
Well, yeah, it's like Clement, and then you get into the birth of the Neoplatonic school, which is the whole idea of the fusion. I mean, this is really the problem, Alex, and this is really sort of the most salient point I can make is you get into the Neoplatonic school where it's sort of the fusion of pagan mysteries with Christianity. The problem with this, the big problem with this, the way I see it, is it's sort of hard to delineate where the Neoplatonism starts and stops and where the Astro-theology starts and stops. Because it's like, what is the, real history and what is just symbolism based on, the stars and the heavens and the sun and the moon.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is really, the big question. It's hard to delineate the Neoplatonic. When does the Neoplatonism start and stop with the Astro-theology?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really the $1 million question.
Mm. Yeah, that astro-theology subject, that tends to be, how do I say it? It's very controversial in some circles.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but if you look at it, it's very valid. I mean, if you just look, you can break down, I get into this. I get into the whole astrological mysterion, is what I call it in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. Jesus is clearly a symbol for the sun, or vice versa. The sun is a symbol for Jesus, but is it just a metaphoric stand-in? Like I said, it's if Jesus isn't a sun god, it's interesting that he's birthed at the winter solstice, just like the sun god Mithras, and then he's resurrected at the vernal equinox. Like I said, if that's not a sun god, I don't know what it is. You have the whole virgin birth with, that's coming straight out of the Egyptian mysteries with, the birth of Horus, the sun god, from the Virgin Mother Isis, the 12 apostles or the 12 houses of the zodiac. You just reach a point with it over. Jesus talks about his followers being children of light and be like the sun.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the whole idea with the procession of the equinoxes, with Christianity being the age of Pisces, Judaism being the age of Aries. I definitely don't shrug that off. I think there's a lot of validity to that. And, I actually think it ties into Masonry because, this is sort of what's going on in the third degree ritual, the whole death and resurrection theme with the sun, the 12 fellowcrafts. You will find this all completely paralleled in Blue Lodge Freemasonry. What's Masonry based on? It's based on the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it again. And I know it's controversial, but I get into it, in Royal Arch of Enoch, and I definitely. It's all coming out of the Book of Enoch is where this is coming from.
Yeah.
It's where Enoch is told, if you want to be like God, study the sun and the moon. So there you have.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's a few books have been written before this whole idea of astrotheology was introduced. Like people like I'm sure I'm sure you know who she is, like Charia S.
Oh, of course, sure.
Um, there's a few books that came out way before her that talks about this, like where the gospel is actually written in the stars, with the 12 zodiac constellations, and you have this whole idea of, like, the Virgin Mary connects to, like, Virgo,
Of
or
course,
the woman clothed in the sun. The Book of Revelation is
right.
associated with Virgo, right?
Oh,
You
absolutely,
know.
absolutely. I mean, look at, within, Christianity, the Gospels,
Hmm.
the symbols are, what is it? The man, the ox, the eagle, and the lion. I mean, anything, those are the four fixed signs of the zodiac.
Hmm.
With the man being Aquarius, the ox is Taurus, the Leo is the lion, and the eagle, that's Scorpio. That's another symbol for Scorpio, is the eagle. So I mean, those are your four fixed signs of the zodiac. I mean, those are the four symbols of the Gospels of Christianity. I mean, need you say any more?
Right, and if you look at even John the Baptist, what is he? He's Aquarius,
Of
right?
course, of course, right. I mean, right. I mean, you have the entire thing of the celebration of Jesus meeting John. And what is it, January 15th, when
Uh-huh.
the sun's in the sign of Aquarius? I mean, you have the whole celebration in August where, which is the death of John the Baptist, which is when that's recognized. And why is that date? I mean, I get into this in my books. I mean, that's when the sign of Aquarius's head appears on the horizon and his body's decapitated.
Hmm.
This is the whole legend of why the Baptist loses his head.
Hmm.
It has to do with Aquarius on the horizon, but it's only his head is visible, his body's beneath the horizon. And again, this is the myth of of the Baptist losing his head. At this exact same time, you have Virgo, who is being exalted, and this is the symbolism of the daughter of Regulus, the little king Herod, who wants his head cut off. I mean, this is all symbolism. This isn't real history. But I mean, I know it's controversial, but I mean,
Right.
you're well beyond coincidence with this stuff.
Yeah. And if you even look at the resurrection motif, I mean, that's present in everything. Like, I mean, you see it like in nature. I mean, you see it in
You
all
see it in the Matrix. Even
nature.
Neo Anderson is resurrected.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see this good dying God motif over and over again, and in another episode, I was actually talking with the Christian. He's a or like a regular Christian, I guess. He's not like a weird like we are. He's not like a Gnostic, but we were just talking about how there's all these different religions that actually have this sort of the same idea, that there's just dying and resurrecting God figure, and Jesus like basically like a culmination of all these different tales
Of course.
that basically were being told by the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, Babylonians. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, of course you have. I mean, you have Horus, you have Mithras, you have, I mean, the feast day of Mithras is December 25th, the birthday of the sun. I mean, come on. Yeah, I mean, I mean, like I said, you have the resurrection of Jesus at the vernal equinox. The Hebrews celebrate this as Passover, when the sun leaves the wasteland of Egypt towards the promised land, leaving behind winter, towards the spring weather. Again, allegorical, not real history. The Exodus is the exodus of the sun from the slavery of Egypt, which is the winter months, towards the Holy Land, which is the springtime. You have the stone of winter being rolled away, in Christianity, where the sun emerges from the tomb, after being dead for 3 months or 3 days in Christianity. Um, King Arthur pulls the sword from the stone or frees the sun ray at Easter. You'll find that in the movie Excalibur. King Arthur is another solar avatar. So yeah, I mean, you will find all this celebrations of these religions going on around the vernal equinox, and it all has to do with the sun leaving behind the winter months, heading towards the promised land. The resurrection motif, pretty irrefutable, I would think, at this point.
Yeah, for sure, man. And even the idea, of course, like the Leo associated with the lion, right? And of course, that goes with the idea, you know, the Demiurge figure in Gnosticism as a lion-headed serpent. And of course, that ties
Well,
with the sun, sort of a solar figure in a way.
oh, of course. Well, I mean, you have, Leo is the sole house of the sun. You have, Christ, the Leo, the lion of the tribe of Judah. You have, in Masonry, the Mason is resurrected by the strong grip of the lion's paw.
Aha.
Again, that's another solar reference. If you want to see this in movies, Aslan the lion in the Chronicle of Narnia, the lion who's returned to Narnia, which is in a perpetual state of winter. But then when he shows up, the winter starts to leave. Boy, oh boy, where have I seen that before? Could that have anything to do with the vernal equinox? Come on.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to look towards the Harry Potter movies, you have Harry Potter as the little, savior of the wizarding world. What house does he put in? Well, he's put in Gryffindor. What's their symbol? The lion. The solar figure. I guess, is Harry Potter killed in Resurrection? Oh, gee whiz, he is. There's another allegory for you. What's the symbol of the enemies of Gryffindor? I mean, it's Slytherin. It's the serpent. Christ versus the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Horus versus Python. Apollo versus Python.
Mm-hmm.
Horus versus Typhon or Set.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. It's just retold all over again.
Mm-hmm. It's always that same story is basically rebooted for a different culture or a different generation, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the same thing being, reused. I mean, it's Luke Skywalker,
Mm-hmm.
picked from the populace to do battle with the dark evil lord. Apollo, the light, Luke, Lux, what light walks across the sky, the sun, who's Apollo's sister, Diana. Why does Princess Leia wear the white robes of the moon? Well, she's symbolizing Diana, the moon goddess. You have Neo Anderson, killed and resurrected, who does battle with the dark evil machines. You Frodo Baggins, who goes on the journey, who's the savior of Middle Earth. You'll find this motif over and over again if you have the eye to look for it. It's really a study of it's comparative religion. Is really what it is, and it turns up in cinema. I mean, I guess you could call it a study of comparative cinema. So, just little shameless plug here. Take a look at the books. Take a look at Royal Arch, Cinema, Symbolism, and CS2, because I get into this material. I really get into it much more in depth than I'm talking about it right now.
Sure. And the whole idea of the monomyth too. Of course, people like Joseph Campbell, he basically created that idea. But I'm not a huge fan of Joseph Campbell, but he gets a lot of his ideas from, of course, Carl Jung, and Carl Jung is pretty much a Gnostic in himself.
Sure.
And then you get to books like The Golden Bough by James Frazer. I mean, he basically sort of had a similar idea where he's comparing all these different religions, but from an anthropological point of view, and it's just really amazing, like kind of the stuff he came up with, and we actually use this in the book I wrote I co-wrote with another author. It's called Baphomet: The Temple Mystery Unveiled, and we get into the whole idea of this demon idol, but the Templars supposedly worshipped and where it actually comes from. But of course, even that subject itself is just like so mystifying that you have to unpack that whole subject until you actually get to the heart of what you're actually looking at.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I like Campbell. I mean, I like Joseph Campbell because why I like him is that monomyth, I think, is very easy to, I think it is very documentable. I mean, in Cinema, Symbolism and CS2, I document that all those elements of that monomyth in some form or fashion are very easy to document in all the Harry Potter movies. They're in the Chronicle of Narnia. They're in Star Wars. They're in Lord of the Rings. That monomyth is there over and over again. I get asked, and it's funny, when you mention Campbell, some people say, well, who else do you like besides Campbell? The other one I always say is, is J.G. Frazer with the Golden Bough.
Yeah.
I think that's a great book also. I have that. It's funny you mentioned this because, you want to talk about Jung and synchronicity. I have both those books sitting right next to me right now as I'm actually doing this interview.
Wow.
So So I guess, that proves Jung's theory on synchronicity correct. I am a huge fan of both of them. And I'm a fan of Carl Jung also.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'm aware of your book on Baphomet. And I mean, I default to you, my friend. I mean, anyone who wrote a 600-page book about this, I dare say you probably have forgotten about it more than I know. I know a little bit about it. But, the goat of Mendes, certainly, the Templars were clearly worshiping or idolizing this thing. I mean, I would say to you, I mean, you obviously are the expert. It seems to me that this thing, I mean, you certainly get into the Levy drawing. You're obviously dealing with a lot of, yin and yang, alchemical, union of opposites, sort of symbolism with this thing. And it seems to me that it has to do with sort of like a union of opposites, male and female, sun and moon, good and evil, light and dark, sort of idol of some kind. So yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, clearly the Templars were doing something with it because they were certainly charged with worshiping it. And, it doesn't really turn up anymore, unfortunately, I guess, or fortunately for us, in Freemasonry or really in, you get into the York Rite, and that's really the rituals, that have the Templar degree at the end of it. And Baphomet and the Goat of Mendes aren't there, and probably for a good thing. But I mean, certainly the Templars seem to be, we're worshiping this thing, or at least idolizing it of some kind. What it actually is sort of lost to history, I suppose. But I agree with you. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating drawing. I talk about it how it turns up in cinema, and it's really I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, it's just so many aspects to that whole symbol.
That's it.
It's just
So
like
many.
it's like really hard to like believe like how deep it runs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you've got the whole thing where, you just look at the drawing by Levy. I mean, it looks like a demon, but you've got the pentagram there.
Right.
You've got the goat's head. I mean, this could be Capricorn. I mean, like I said, you got the yin and yang. You got the alchemical caduceus there. Caduceus of Hermes, or even Hermes Trismegistus. So you got the wisdom. I mean, it's just a fascinating thing to look at, and I'm fascinated by it. But you're the one who wrote the 700-page book on it, so
Yeah.
I certainly would default to you on that one.
Well, that book, it took me I co-wrote with the other author, Tracy Twyman, and we sort of agreed to work on it together. But we came up with a lot of fascinating ideas associated with it. And it really goes back to this whole idea about the serpent in the garden, really. That's where we trace it all the way back to in the book.
So sort of some sort of like, like demon, serpent, wisdom bringer, I'm assuming.
Something to that effect, but it also ties with the whole concept of the Demiurge as well. And
okay.
Yeah, in my opinion.
Sure.
It's just, oh man, it's like it's insane of how deep we go. But basically, he's basically a mixture. In a nutshell, how Eliphas Levi gets into this. He talks about how different occult practitioners have decided to actually tap into both God and the devil at the same time, and that supposedly, right. If you channel into that, somehow you're supposed to, receive, the true ultimate power of the universe through this so-called astral light. And he actually, Eliphas Levi talks about this in depth, and we actually, theorize what that actually means. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating. The book, I do recommend people to pick up the book if you haven't done so already. So I would start with Robert Sullivan's book on Symbolism and the Royal Arch of Enoch, and then I'd also recommend my book.
Of course. So, hey, no such thing as a shameless plug. If you're not going to do it, if no one else is going to do it yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I mean, it's a 600-page book, so by all means, check it out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So yeah, I want to make an asterisk of what I said earlier about Eliphas Levi. I know he was talking about how you're supposed to channel into both God and the devil at the same time, and somehow you become powerful. But but if you actually do that, you pretty much risk destroying yourself in the process. So that's what he's basically warning against. Like, can you maintain your morality or your soul if you actually do that sort of thing? But when you actually look at different Gnostic sects, like Carpocrates, he sort of alludes to that idea too, in a way. We're supposed to give the last farthing to the devil, to engage in both the left-hand path and then also the right-hand path at the same time. I'm not telling people to do that, but I'm just saying this is what they were alluding to, in my opinion.
That's like Aleister Crowley said the exact same thing.
Right. Aleister Crowley. Yeah, that's another guy I want to bring up to you with. Now, as far as like the idea of this idea of the world's craftsman or the architect of the universe, that very much corresponds with, of course, obviously the Gnostic idea of the Demiurge. But is there any difference between that, or what's your opinion on that?
Right. I mean, you clearly can see, being that the things, the architect, that it definitely sort of has this Demiurge-like feel to it. But I would say this: Masonry doesn't embrace any one religion. It doesn't. In order to join, you have to be. You can't be an atheist. You have to believe in a supreme being. So if you want to, they just use the term, sort of generically. But I mean, obviously, it does have as soon as you get into architecture and grand geometrician, it definitely has sort of that Demiurge feel to it. But that's probably, it's for a Mason. It's supposed to be whatever you want it to be. So it certainly can be a spiritual godhead of some kind. I mean, if you're Christian, it's going to be some sort of, Judeo-Christian God, Jehovah, or Jesus. So as long as you believe in a supreme being, you're okay. You can join Masonry, and it's up to you to determine whatever that is. I don't think when these guys were putting it together, they had the Demiurge in mind, but I can see where people could draw that comparison, with the architecture component of it. But I think it more has to do with Masons being architects, city planners, civil engineers, and they tie that into geometry being a form of a sacred element associated with deity, is the way I would probably more define it. But I do see, I can't argue with you. I can definitely see where someone could, if they wanted to, draw a parallel to a, Manichaean Demiurge or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting about that, I mean, it really, you look at even the foundation of the United States. I mean, all these people were involved in this tradition, like George Washington. I don't know if it's John Hancock. I don't know if he was involved. Was he?
No, he's not.
Okay, never mind. No, I don't want.
He was Hancock. Hancock is not a Freemason.
Okay.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Hancock was. Hamilton was not.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just feel like it's just amazing to me that, the foundation of the United States is very much intertwined with the Freemasonic tradition. And obviously, when you look at the monuments in Washington, D.C., are also very Masonically and Egyptian inspired.
Oh, I don't disagree with you. I mean, I don't disagree. I mean, I have a whole chapters on this in Royal Arch of Enoch. I mean, I have a chapter called The United States of Freemasonry, where I define the United States as a Masonic republic. I mean, you have the triple division of governance in a Masonic lodge, between a worshipful master and the two wardens, the junior and senior. I mean, this, of course, turns up in the Constitution with the triple division of government between a chief executive, a legislature, and a judicial. That comes straight out of Blue Lodge Freemasonry. The architecture is Masonic from start to finish, whether it be in Washington. You can find this in Baltimore, Maryland, which is where I'm at. Mm-hmm. You can find this in New York. You can find this surrounding the construction of the first college in the United States to offer degrees in civil engineering, Union College of Schenectady, New York. You'll find it on state seals, on logos. I mean, all this stuff harkens back to Freemasonry, Blue Lodge, and both the high degree systems. I do not, I mean, I wrote, I mean, this is what the Royal Arch of Enoch is completely about, is getting into this Masonic architecture and symbolism, in city planning and things like that. I mean, I have chapter upon chapter of it in Royal Arch of Enoch.
Yeah, and the whole even like urban planning development, I think, is also has a lot of Masonic ideas in it too.
Oh yeah, I mean, you get into templates and even with street patterns in DC and
Right.
the Pythagorean theorem and the 47th proposition of Euclid, and certainly in DC you have the roundabouts with all the streets radiating out. That's a solar reference. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I remember watching this video. He was by some, I think it's like around Saturn's Eye or something, but he's he's a Christian, basically. I know that's not, you can't really tell from that name, but, but he's on YouTube, but he was investigating, this, the Washington, Freemasonic Lodge there, or the greatest, the biggest one in the United States. And then he was also looking into this cube, this black cube that's somehow connected to Saturn. And is there any connection between Saturn and Freemasonry? Like, is there anything like that you find?
Only in two contexts in Masonry. When you're dealing with Saturn, you're dealing with philosophically, you're dealing with the planet that rules scholarship and melancholy. This comes out of the works of Albert Durer. So anytime you're dealing with Saturn, you're dealing with scholarship. It associates with death because Saturn rules the planet Capricorn, the house of Capricorn. And Capricorn is, of course, the sign in which the winter solstice occurs when the sun is dead. So Saturn can have this, deathly feel. I mean, of course, if you look at the astrological sigil of Saturn or its symbol, it has the giant hook on it. I mean, of course, this is the Grim Reaper. This is where the Grim Reaper sigh comes from, death. And of course, Saturn associates with death because it rules the house of Capricorn, under which the winter solstice occurs when the sun is technically dead in the northern hemisphere. In Masonry, it has two contexts. It turns up twice. And that is one in the Chamber of Reflection, where a Mason is told to contemplate their own mortality and to actually write their own will. So, in that context, you're supposed to recognize your mortality, accept death, that it's eventually coming, and to basically write, your testament, as it were. So you could say that definitely has an element of Saturn, component to it. And the other thing is Saturn associates with death. So if you're in Freemasonry and you want to keep someone out, you give them death. Well, how do you do that? You drop the black cube. This is the idea of the black ball. It's more called, but it's actually not a ball. It's a cube. It's a little black cube. It's not a ball. So you're actually, if you want to keep an initiate or a petitioner out, that's the better word, a petitioner. You give them Saturn. You give them the death blow by dropping the little death symbol, and that keeps the petitioner out. But that's about it. It has, those are the only two contextual bases for Saturn within Freemasonry.
Wow. And, and of course, Saturn is associated with agriculture and even fertility in a way. But Saturn also represents like usurping different kings in a way. Like if you look at the Greek legends, you always find this idea that each successive god is somehow usurping the last one. Like you have like Saturn usurping Uranus, and he castrates him. Then you have Zeus, who castrates Zeus as well. And then somehow they gain that power, and they become sort of like an arch demiurge in a way. And
Sure.
Then they cast each god and aside into the underworld, just like Tartaros. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. I wonder I kept thinking what that actually means, but I don't know. Who knows? But as
Yeah, it's interesting.
yeah, now I want to go to into a different topic that has very little to do with what we were talking about earlier. It's the movie The Ninth Gate. So now we talked about this in our previous interview a while back, and we were possibly bringing up the idea that somehow Johnny Depp's character, Dean Corso, represents sort of like initiate that goes through all these different stages.
Oh, yeah,
And
sure.
then like towards the end he's supposed to be like enlightened by the light of Lucifer or something, or he's actually
Sure.
Lucifer himself. So I mean, could you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good movie to talk about. It's a movie that I initially took on in the Royal Arch of Enoch. The final chapter of the Royal Arch of Enoch deals with some Kabbalistic, Masonic imagery, and the Ninth Gate was a movie that I talked about. I revisited the Ninth Gate in Cinema Symbolism 2, my most recent book, because between the time that the first book came out and when Cinema Symbolism 2 came out, I've seen Ninth Gate a couple more times. I picked up on some other stuff on it, and it was a movie that I wanted to revisit in Cinema Symbolism 2. But sure, I mean, you have you have a lot going on in this. I mean, you have the whole idea of Johnny Depp being a sort of living reflection of the engravings, that the engravings are sort of prophesizing his journey, towards this enlightenment. And they kind of incorrectly twine Satan with Lucifer,
Mm-hmm.
where Lucifer is the light bearer, wisdom, and this is seemingly what they're really after. It's they're after wisdom. This is what Balkan's after. But they associate it with more like left hand path sort of gnosis.
Right.
Right. Clearly. But I mean, you have this whole parallel going on with Kabbalah, with the 10th sort of Sephiroth Kether, and the unlocking of the nine unlocks the 10th. And, this leads to the divine wisdom, things like Ein Sof. So you have the whole thing with the ninth gate, sort of mirroring Hebrew Kabbalah. And then, of course, you get into Freemasonry with this, where, in the ninth gate, beyond the ninth gate is this wisdom, the supreme wisdom of some kind. And again, you have this parallel in Freemasonry, again, with the Royal Arch, where beneath nine arches is, the tetragrammaton where this wisdom derives from. So you have this whole thing with nine arches, nine gates. I mean, so where is this coming from? Well, you get into Dante Alighieri with Inferno, where Satan qua Lucifer is in the ninth ring of hell.
Yeah.
And you have this whole sort of, if you read Albert Pike, you have this sort of reversal in the ninth gate. I mean, excuse me, in Alighieri's Inferno, where, it's like a reversal of Catholic doctrine where Satan and Lucifer are actually the light, is actually the wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And, by descending into hell, you're actually gaining gnosis. I mean, this ties into where Dante and Virgil leave. They ascend Lucifer to receive light, which is wisdom. So, I mean, it's this whole sort of reversal there of Catholic dogma. But I like it where it's nine circles of hell, nine arches in Freemasonry, and nine gates in the Johnny Depp movie. If you watch the movie, you will see little busts of Dante Alighieri turning up from time to time in the movie. I like it how there's some very unique subliminal imagery going on in that. I really found this unique, where certainly if you're familiar with Albert Pike, the Lucifer, the female Lucifer character, who's very beautiful in the movie, you hear, in mythology, Lucifer is the planet Venus, because it rises in the east as false light. And of course, Venus is, in Greco-Roman mythology, is the love goddess, Aphrodite or Venus. So I liked it in the ninth gate how Lucifer was the beautiful woman. I mean, and this ties into this whole idea of, this comparative study with Lucifer being Venus, who is the love goddess. And this is why in the ninth gate, the Lucifer is the beautiful woman.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting in this, and this ties into this whole Neoplatonic school, is if you really pay attention to this, Polanski did a great job on this. I don't know if he did it intentionally or not, but it really works for great effect. Is you will constantly find that woman and Johnny Depp turning up in that film, standing before Shell gasoline stations with the Shell. And of course, this immediately draws to your subconscious mind the Botticelli painting of Venus, in the seashell. So it's this whole, resurrection of the sun, of light, of the beautiful woman, qua Lucifer, being the love goddess, but being also the devil. I thought that was very well done by Polanski. And then you're absolutely right. I mean, you have Johnny Depp as sort of the initiate. He's on this journey of Gnosis. And, at the end of the movie, he goes into the castle, which I think you and I were talking about. Looks like it, could have associated with the Cathars, which was sort of this, middle age, medieval Gnostic sect, to receive the light. I mean, that's how the movie ends. He walks in and it becomes, bright light. He's receiving the light of Lucifer, left-hand path Kabbalah. I mean, it's a great movie. It's one of my all-time favorites, but it is very rich in symbolism, no question about it.
And what I also found interesting is the scene where the woman, I just keep forgetting her name, but the female Lucifer character who actually has sex with Johnny Depp. Well, I don't know if they actually have sex in that scene, but they were actually, they were looking like they were having sex. But anyway, that basically symbolizes this whole idea about the whore of Babylon who rides the beast, right?
Oh, right. Well, I mean, you have that image. I don't disagree with that. I mean, you had the whole image of her riding the beast, associating with the whore of Babylon. I mean, and again, at the end, if you want to look at, the union of opposites, it's the male and female, the sun and moon. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I picked up on that as well with the engraving and with her, riding the beast, being the whore of Babylon figure. Yeah, I don't disagree with that imagery at all. And I think it really works for great effect in that film. I mean, if you look at it, the engravings, clearly, they mirror the tarot, obviously. But if you look at them, they also mirror a lot of the images coming out of the Lutheran Bible, Martin Luther's Bible, which had these very Gothic sort of, imagery in them. So yeah, it's a great movie. It's rich in symbolism. If you're interested, definitely check out Royal Arch of Enoch. And I get into it much more depth in my most recent book, Cinema Symbolism 2. Like I said, I've watched it subsequently, and there was more stuff I wanted to talk about, and I get into it much more in depth in Cinema Symbolism 2.
Sure. Another question that sort of ties in with the film The Ninth Gate, but as far as like any recent films, like any specific like Gnostic or esoterically occult films that has come out as of late, have you noticed anything that's been like that in the recent times in the movie theater?
Yeah, I mean, well, probably nothing quite like The Ninth Gate, but like, I talk about Gnosticism in films in my books. I mean, certainly, I've talked about this on other shows as well. When it comes to such Gnostic movies, I mean, we obviously turn to the Matrix movie, especially the first one. I mean, I guess that's really sort of Gnosticism proper right there. Certainly movies like The Truman Show, that has a lot of Gnostic themes in it with the Christoph being the Demiurge, the fashioner of the false reality, Truman, true man, searching spiritual gnosis and the truth. You have the Fight Club with not Johnny Depp, with Brad Pitt and Ed Norton. Certainly, the deconstruction of the self, the deconstruction of the Demiurge, the ending of the material world. And the rebellion against God. I thought that was very well done in Fight Club. I'm constantly asked, I haven't seen these yet, but I'm told, and these are on my to watch list, Alex, and I plan on watching them. I'm probably in Cinema Symbolism 3 going to get into these, but, movies such as, and I haven't seen them, but I've just been told, movies such as like Donnie Darko, has Gnostic themes, Dark City, Snowpiercer, the Lego movie of all things. I'm constantly being emailed and tweeted to about the Lego movie, that this has sort of Gnostic themes in them. So, I haven't seen those yet. They're on my to watch list, but I mean, just for Gnostic films, just the three that just come to mind would be the first Matrix movie, The Truman Show, and Fight Club.
Mm-hmm. And the Dark City movie, I think you would definitely have to watch that one, because that's a very Gnostic theme as well. It really ties in with this idea of not only Gnosticism, like as far as like you have these strangers, which are basically alien parasites that inhabited dead bodies that have somehow put certain occupants on this city under hypnosis. Like every time it hits 12, they always change things around so they can, I don't know, somehow they're trying to just decipher what drives a human being and whether it has a soul or what a spirit is, because these demonic archons are always trying to possess this spiritual aspect of humanity somehow, but they just can't get it because they're not spiritual.
Right, sure.
But
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it at all, so I'll definitely have to check it out.
Yeah, but also it also it connects with this idea of actually the flat Earth, and and I know it's kind of it's been on the rounds as of late, like on YouTube and different websites, even like Eric Dubay is like going on and on about it. I mean, I myself, I don't personally believe in the flat Earth, but I can see why people may be spoken about or maybe believe that idea. But do you have any your thoughts on the whole flat Earth subject?
Yeah, I don't. I was asked this on another show of relate. I mean, I think it's total nonsense. I mean, you can see the curvature of the Earth from an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it with your own eyes. If there was flat Earth, I could go to a tall city and I mean a tall building in a city, get on the roof with binoculars or a high-powered telescope and be able to see, the Empire State Building in New York because it's flat. There's
Right.
nothing stopping me. You can't do that because of the Earth's curvature. Furthermore, there would be the sun would always be out. If the Earth was flat and it's rotating around the Earth, there's no sunrise or sunset. So, unless you want to say, well, then the Earth would have to be the center and the sun would have to be rotating around that. I think Newtonian physics dispel all this 100%. I think it's total nonsense. I'd find it hard to believe 2017 anyone still really believes in flat Earth. I think if they're putting it out there more to just try to get attention of some kind.
Yeah, I almost feel like it might be even a psyop. I'm not sure familiar with that terminology, but I think it's probably like implanted out there to mislead people in a way. I mean, honestly, like I can see where people might think that there is a flat Earth, but I don't know. I just feel like it's just so the way people push that idea, and then whenever you question their flat Earth dogma, then they immediately become defensive.
Yeah, but I mean, it's easy to disprove.
Right.
I mean, if there's no flat Earth,
mm-hmm.
you and I would be floating around right now in our respect because there's no gravity.
Right.
I mean, you go outside and you could jump and you'd go up into the sky. The reason that there's gravity and that we don't fall off is because the Earth's round.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's flat Earth, there's no gravity. That's the whole purpose. That's what flat Earth came from, was people couldn't wrap their head around the idea of gravity.
Mm-hmm.
But once you inject that in, then that that the Earth is round and the gravitational field is being generated by the orbit.
Mm-hmm.
If the Earth is flat, then you should be able to go outside and jump, and you'd go 30 feet up into the sky because there's no gravity.
Right.
So it's easy to disprove.
And we even look at you pour a drop of water on a flat surface. What happens? It becomes round. What doesn't become flat? So it really kind of conforms to the space around us in a way.
Sure.
So I don't know why I'm talking about the flat Earth, but I don't know why it came to me. But there's a scene in the Dark City where it kind of reminds me of the flat Earth. But you'll see it when you watch it.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But anyway, another question. I know we have to wrap this up here, but a couple of questions that come to mind is as far as like the idea of it goes back to the great architect of the universe. Now, this idea of Yabulan, and it's sort of controversial to other people, but it's basically like a trinity of different deities like Baal, Osiris, and Yahweh or Jehovah. And of course, you look at the Baphomet figure. He's also described as this three-faced demon idol. And I theorize in the Baphomet book, that somehow they probably actually connects to three different figures in Christianity as well, which is Jesus, John the Baptist, and Paul the Apostle, which in my opinion really sounds a lot like Simon the Magician. But we'll get to that later. That's another question. But as far as like Yabalon, like what significance does Yabalon have in Freemasonry?
Right. Well, it's really something I'm not supposed to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
It's the name of the. It gets Masons into a lot of trouble.
Okay.
It's in the Blue Lodge you have a substitute word.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the substitute name of God. That I'm not allowed to say the passwords or anything.
Okay.
So in the Blue Lodge, you get a substitute name. In the ritual, the name you mentioned is the name that's given. But I would just say that it's a ceremonial name. It's just for ceremonial purposes. But you will constantly find this triple division of wording. It probably ties in. It's like you said. You get the Holy Trinity. 3 degrees of Blue Lodge Freemasonry, the triple division of the sun, in the east, west, and south. So it ties into, into this triple division. But you're right. I mean, it's a name that fuses Jehovah with Osiris and Baal. And it's a name. It gets Masons into all sorts of trouble. It's one of the main thrusts of anti-Masonry, but it's a name that I would just say is meant to be ceremonial. No one believes that that's actually the name of deity.
Okay. And another question for you. Now the figure of Simon the Magician, I'm sure you're familiar with. He is of course connected with the figure of Simon the Sorcerer in the story of Acts, where he tries to buy the secrets of the Holy Ghost from Peter, and of course Peter rebukes him. Then of course he repents, and then he goes off his merry way. But a lot of church fathers say that he went on to form his own doctrines of Gnosticism. He's basically the godfather of all Gnostic heresy. And of course, the church fathers, that they demonize him and demonize all the other Gnostic groups and so on and so forth as much of, heretics that came from the devil to pollute the church, et cetera, et cetera. But now, as far as like the figure of Simon Magus himself, does he have any specific place in the Freemasonic tradition, or I'm not sure. I don't know, but
no. The answer's no.
Okay.
I mean, I know I'm familiar with this figure. You're right. He's considered the father of all heresies. He's a magician. As you said, and he kind of does these magic tricks with the apostles, and they always the stories about him are written by Orthodox Christians. So Simon always winds up losing. But you're right. He's considered the father of all heresies and sort of the godfather of the Gnostics, at least in the church fathers' eyes. But there is no nexus between Simon Magus and Freemasonry in any way, shape, or form.
Okay. Yeah, I always wondered about that, but I wasn't sure. But
sure.
Yeah, I think about a lot of things that are kind of bizarre to most people, but it's whatever. We're Gnostics, so we're allowed to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't mind, talking about it, and certainly, you got a question, you let me have it.
Sure, yeah, and I really appreciate the fact that you agreed to come on my show, and I really hope this will, inspire a lot of people to research these subjects on their own and do their homework before they actually, blab on and on about them. But as far as like the symbolism in movies, and of course, in all these different occult orders and occult traditions, I think it's pretty fascinating. I think it all points to something that we can't really put specific wordage or names to. Like there's like an ineffable mystery. Now, I know people might say, "Oh, that's all inspired by the devil or Lucifer," or Gnosticism and Freemasonry always leads to Lucifer, or it's all Luciferian stuff. But
Oh, sure.
right. But I mean, I see this all the time.
Well, the whole thing with Lucifer comes into it through Albert Pike. But Pike is just talking about, it's a solar allegory. It's again, this is what we were talking about earlier. He says, is it Lucifer that bears the light? Doubt it not. And what he's talking about, and this is in Morals and Dogma, what he's talking about is Venus rising in the east in the morning hours before the sunrise. And he's basically saying, is it Venus that heralds the coming sunrise? Doubt it not. But he just calls Venus Lucifer. And again, the reason why Lucifer associates with the planet Venus is it's just that it's a false light. It's not the sun. It's not the true light. Mm-hmm. But when he says, is it Lucifer that bears the light? He could just as easily say, is it, the planet Venus that heralds the coming sunrise? Doubt it not. I mean, it's the same thing. It has the same meaning. He's not talking about Luciferianism or devil worship or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, the figure of Lucifer is very much I want to say it's totally misunderstood, but I mean, there's just so many layers to that legend that, I mean, it's just, you have to peel it more and more to actually get to the bottom of it. And I get into my website on theani.com. I think one of my articles is called, the Forbidden Gnosis of Lucifer and Icarus. But I kind of compare those, and Prometheus as well, but I could compare all those different figures as sort of like, they kind of seem like the same thing, really, to me, in a way. And also, another question just came to mind, and I think this is probably the last one for the night. There's a couple movies that I saw recently, and I'm not sure if you saw them, but one movie that came out was called Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Have you seen that movie yet?
No.
Okay. And have you seen Prometheus and Alien Covenant?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, sorry. No problem. Well, those movies though I think are pretty interesting because there's so many ideas, especially occult ideas, associated with both movies, and I think, or three movies. I think you definitely should take a look at and maybe explore.
I get asked about Prometheus all the time, and that's another one on my list. Interstellar is another one I haven't seen yet, but these are on my to watch list. So yeah, when like I said, what I'm doing is I'm working, Cinema Symbolism 2's out. I'm working on my first work of fiction. Once that's released, then I'm going to probably go to Cinema Symbolism 3. We'll see.
Awesome. I can't wait to see what you'll unpack from those movies because, yeah, it's just like I'm just kind of blown away what they're saying to us.
Oh, sure, yeah. Right. There's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's just like the whole Gnostic idea of Yaldabaoth and Archons, Preston humanity is in there. I mean, Gnosticism is just like it's all over the place in those movies, in my opinion. So
I'll definitely take a look at it. I definitely want to see them. I absolutely want to see them.
Sure. And the Alien Covenant, though, is, I don't know. That's pretty iffy to me, but I mean, I still enjoyed it for what it's worth. But oh well. But anyway, so thank you so much for joining my show, and I really hope to have you back on at some point again because I think we covered a lot of really interesting ground that I haven't been able to do on other podcasts. So yeah, I definitely want to have you back at some point.
Oh, well, thank you, Alex. And let me just wrap up by just giving you my website real quick.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Alex, for having me on Megas Aeon tonight. Great show. I really appreciate it. And, it was great questions. And, just to, people listening, I have no problem with people asking me about flat earth or this or that. I mean, I always like to get into diverse subjects. I mean, I may not always agree with them, but I have no problem answering the questions that are posed to me. I mean, I certainly don't want all my interviews to sound alike. So absolutely, I thought you asked some great questions tonight. I really appreciate it. If you're interested in my work and my books, I have 3 books out right now: Royal Arch of Enoch, Cinema Symbolism, and Cinema Symbolism 2. The easiest way to find me and my books is just go to my website. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is just my name. It's www.robertwsullivan.iv.com. That's the letter I, the letter V for the fourth.com, robertwsullivaniv.com. There's information about me information about my events and appearances, where I'm going to be, links to buy the books. Follow me on social media, on Twitter. I have a YouTube channel, a link to that, where you can listen to other shows and watch some videos I produced and listen to other podcasts I've been on. So yeah, just go to my website. It's the easiest way to buy my books. I mean, they're available on all the main, online retailers, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all that. They're in the ebook form as well, which are cheaper, of course. So just go to my website, www.robertwsullivan.com. Loads of information there. Very easy to navigate. Buy the books and check it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir. Glad to have you on another point. Okay.
Thanks, Alex.
Yep. You got it. You take care, sir.